You know who's a great guy? Mike Carparelli. If you go to carparelligutars.com, he'll send you some of the best guitar components money can buy. Or he'll build you an absolute soulmate of a guitar. I play a Carparelli. You should too. All right, moving on and feeling strong. I can't see you, but I'm sure you guys are doing great with this. So I hope you're learning something new and picking up some skills that'll help you work out your own beats for yourself. We are up to Chapter 5. And just to recap where we left off, Chapter 4 was about filling out the beat, adding some accents, working with velocity, using grace notes and ghost notes to try to embellish your beat and make it a little more dynamic. That was the plan. And I think we've come up with something pretty decent so far. And in Chapter 5, we're going to move ahead with that, and we're going to add some variations to the song. By variations, I'm talking about moving from one part of a song to another, creating some variations on the beat to accentuate those changes. So that would mean going from a verse to a chorus, or from a verse to a bridge, or just adding little things into your song just to change up the beat a little bit and add some dynamics. In order to facilitate that, I have jumped ahead and laid out some quick and dirty variations, and I'll let you listen to them and just to see where we're heading with that. But just keep in mind, this is just what I came up with at the moment, and you may have come up with something completely different. And as I've mentioned many times, this is a matter of taste and style and doing your own thing. I want you to have this video for free, but if you've got $2 or $3 lying around and you can kick them over here, it helps me take time from my real job and do more of this. So find the link below, go to PayPal, select only the least of what you can afford, and just know that I'd really appreciate it. Let's take a listen to a couple of the variations I've come up with. If you look at the arrangement of the song, we've got one part here which we can call a verse, a second part, which is a little chord change in the progression, which we might call a second part of the verse or maybe a chorus. This song is not laid out in a traditional fashion. We just wanted to make some changes to add the variations. But over here we have a bridge type of thing, which is a complete deviation from the standard or main beat, and then we can do something interesting there. Okay, so you may have noticed there's just a variation on the beat. It's largely the same feel and rhythm, but with some different instrumentation. Just want to take a second to point out what I'm doing up here with this yellow strip. This is a loop feature, and I don't know if I've mentioned it before, but it's pretty essential to what you're trying to do here because you're going to run back and forth over a section of the song, and it allows you to just hit the space bar and it will go back to the beginning of the loop. That way you can just focus on the section of the song you're working at, but I'm sure you get that. The way in Logic that it's activated is you can just actually click on the field above the ruler, and that will activate it. And if you just grab a section of this area and drag it, it creates a new loop section for you. The other way is to activate the loop toggle up in the menu. Okay, let's see what I did here. We heard the main beat in Chapter 4, and let's check out the variation that I came up with here. In order to demonstrate what I did to make those variations, I'm actually just going to create a duplicate track and drag the bits over, and I'm going to mute the main one, and then we'll join them later. Okay, so let's bring this down. I just Option drag that to copy the section, and what I'm going to do to create the variation is just take the main beat and drag a new section over the part of the song I want to fill. And that way I can just use the notes that I already have readily available. And mainly what we did there was just the common practice of moving from the hi-hat to a ride cymbal. Okay, so what I'm going to do to get this started is just grab these hi-hat notes and drag them up to the bell of the ride cymbal. Let's just take a quick listen to that. I don't know what you're hearing, but that is way too busy for my liking. So I'm going to thin those out because the ride obviously carries a lot further than the closed hi-hat. So it's running into the next note and creating too much noise, I think. Let's listen to it this as it is here. Okay, that sounds a little better. I think what we can do is pump up these alternating notes. So if you're listening closely, you're changing the feeling of the way the ride follows the beat. So instead of going 1, 2, 3, 4, it's going 1, 3, 1. And it's just pushing that part of the beat. You might like it, you might not. It's really up to you. And this section over here is still working. Still doing what the hi-hat was doing, which was adding a variation at the end of the bar. We can edge up the velocity on these notes a bit just to add a little accent. That's a little bit too busy over there, so I'm going to okay, that's a little better. Another thing we can do is that type of note. So if I take this 16th note here, is that a 16th note? Yeah, 16th note. It accentuates the next beat by giving it a sort of pushed feeling. I might do another one over here. So when you listen to that whole thing, I've got 2 bars. At the end of the second bar, at the end of the first bar, it's doing that da, 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 and the second bar is doing the same thing. That's really the power of small differences. This is a very light note. It's barely audible, but it just does enough to push that beat forward and give it that feeling. All right, another thing I like to do with ride cymbals is take advantage of the swell of the outside of the cymbal in order to create some noise just at a low level, filling in the space in the background. So if you look at the notation here, ride bell, ride edge, ride out, I'm just going to grab these notes. Okay, and I'm going to drop the velocity on those to a very low level. Okay, so maybe like 2 or 3, even less. And all it's going to do is create a little bit of a wash in the background. Okay, and it's almost like the vibrations of the ride bell are coming out of the edge of the ride and just filling out the sound a bit. Okay, another thing we did to this beat was added a snare drag or a stick drag on the front of the bar, and that's over here. What I mean by that is a sort of bouncing drag that a drummer will do as they drag the stick from the outer edge of the snare into the center of the snare, or the other way around. And it creates a little fill there. It's almost like a little roll. So let's see how we do that. This is a very quick succession of notes. All right, that seems a little long at the moment, but we're going to listen to it and see. So if you notice what I've done up here in the LCD, I've got it set to 30-second notes. And I could change it to 16th. So these are 30-second notes, and so it's a very tight grouping of notes. And I'm going to highlight them And in this case, I'm going to ramp the velocity of these notes from high to low at a very low level. So this is maybe going to go from 5 to 1. Okay, let's listen to how that affects things. One thing something like that does is it's pushing the snare note here onto the kick, and it creates that little pushing feeling on the beat. But it also means we don't need these anymore. Okay, I think that's everything we did with that variation. Let's take a look at our model and see if we've missed anything. Nope, that looks about right. Okay, what we're doing here is kind of quick and dirty. We're just experimenting with different ideas. Whatever you hear in your head, and you try to make it work on the page. And you go back and forth with it, and you try it a few times, listen to it a couple times. It's not the kind of thing that you always get the first try, but you push yourself to do some trial and error and see what you come up with. Now we're really starting to fill in our song. It is very short. We're going to go back to this main beat one more time, back to this variation again, and then we're coming up to the bridge part here. There's a little 1-bar pause, so I just added a little cymbal crash there. A couple of things you'll notice by the field here is that it's these notes here are dimmed, which is just indicating to you that it is a loop that is dragged out. And you'll notice if you highlight more than one field here, it will put them together in the editing field. And that is true even for loops on different tracks. But that just allows you to see the notes as it passes. So let's hear this little change here. All right, so what did we do with the bridge here? We went in a very different direction. Let's listen to it again and take a look at the notes. Right, you've more than likely heard something like that before. We have a hit on the 2 and the 3 and I've added a couple of hits on the toms here. So let's go through the process of trying to recreate that loop. I'm just going to option drag the main loop to get some scratch, because that's where we started. And going to delete the shaker because it's not helping us at all in this part. And we're going to change the closed hi-hat to an open hi-hat. And I'm pretty sure we're going to have the same issue as with the ride cymbal, that the open hi-hat will be too busy sounding. Let's thin that out and compare it. Okay, so we're keeping that hi-hat pretty simple. Right, and then we changed the configuration of the snare hits. So we went with a 2 and a 3 and. And then we added the tom hits. I'm just going to borrow these notes. Okay, so we're adding these two tom hits here, and I'm using the mid and low tom. The question might be, at what velocity level can you hear the toms, or before they become overbearing? Well, that goes back to what we've talked about before, is just experimenting with the extremes, just see what they sound like. But generally, in the middle of a beat like this, somewhere in the middle, 30 to 50 range will probably be enough. The first hit I'm putting a little heavier so that it kind of fades rather than builds up as you go through these two little hits here. And I've reduced the velocity on the two kicks here. You can use kicks to accentuate a tom hit because otherwise they sound a little hollow and you want a little bit of low end there. But in fact, because you're playing two notes at the same time, it's adding the gain on both of those notes, so it can really make that a little overbearing. So you might want to bring the velocities down just to keep the subtleties intact. And then I added another tom hit over here in the mid tom. And that was just to fill this space and add another kind of syncopated hit. Okay, another thing I did on this beat was add an open hi-hat smash as it hits the snare so that it punches up this accent here. And I'm going to go pretty heavy on the hi-hat. Okay, that's starting to come together as I had laid it out originally. And I'm putting the heavy hits on the open hi-hat along with the snare. Okay, so that's creating a variation for the bridge. Keep in mind, this is a rough cut. We're probably going to come back and refine this as we listen to it a little more. We're just trying to lay down the main ideas. And you never know. You might listen to it a few times and go back and just not like it and just change it all again. But you got to start somewhere, and you keep experimenting and trying to get the beat right in the pocket as best as you can. We're going to keep the variation theme going, and if you listen to this bit here, you'll see I made another change there, and there's no particular reason why. I just heard it and thought it might sound good. So let's give that a listen. Right, so all I've done there is taken the simple, the main beat, and just added an open hi-hat to keep the feeling going as we come out of the bridge. Okay, so I'm just going to grab the main drum loop, drag a new version of it over, open the editor. I'm going to have to mute this. Okay, now we can save ourselves a little bit of editing by just going back to the bridge part, because we already have our open hi-hat notes set and we want to keep that. So rather than making them again, we're just gonna copy and paste. So I'm going to set the playhead at the beginning of the loop I want to copy onto. Make sure I've highlighted the right track. And there we go. And we'll just keep the velocity the same as it was in the previous one. Okay, and just to bring us to the extra of the song, I'm going to copy the variation with the ride, just to keep that change consistent. And to end the song, I just have a simple cymbal crash, which we looked at before. All right, well, that's really starting to sound like something. It's coming together. Keep in mind, nothing you do at this point is written in stone. You might listen to a few things, decide you don't like it, you go back and change it. And also keep in mind, there is a learning curve to this. You have to spend some time doing some trial and error. And you want to develop the skills to be able to translate the way you're hearing it in your head and make it come alive in the editing field. If you have questions about doing any of this, please put it in the comments, and I get back to everyone, and I'm happy to help you out as best as I can from a distance. That brings us to chapter 6, in which we're going to add some fills and finalize this song. Right now, the transitions from one part of the song to the next are sounding a little dry, and they're not really queuing up, so we can add fills to make those parts of the song come alive, and do little things to the variations to actually add some dynamics to our song. That's what we're doing in chapter 6, so when you feel ready, move along to chapter 6, and I'll see you there.